Hey guys, this is my first video that I'm actually recording for my new YouTube channel, so I hope if you're watching now that you will go and subscribe. I'm literally just starting this without a lot of prep, but given that many of you have asked for more videos, I decided it's about time because this is something I've wanted to be doing for a while and I hadn't branched out and finally done it yet. So it's called Psychoeducate. So please go follow me and subscribe on YouTube if you're interested in more videos that are about anything related to therapy, mental health, understanding personality disorders, understanding how to cope with traumatic stress response, especially specific videos that will be about women healing from sexual trauma, and coping skills for anxiety, coping skills for depression, and overall like traumatic stress response. So all of those types of videos are going to be coming at you. I'm finally putting them together in one place. So I'm really excited to be doing this and I hope you go watch. So for today's video, I had promised that I would do a live and talk about how to find a therapist. So I decided I'd put it on YouTube so you guys can access it at a later date. So a couple tips that I'm going to talk about today with finding a therapist is one, where do you go? How do you even start? Like, where do you look for somebody? Two, what types of questions do you need to ask? And then three, how to know when it's time to terminate or if you need to look for somebody else. So first of all, where to look. The most important thing with a therapist is to shop around. You really need to think of a therapist as like when you are dating. You usually don't just decide to make the first person that you meet your boyfriend or your girlfriend. In most cases, you need to go meet and talk with several different therapists before you find the one that's the right fit for you. So I highly encourage you to not just find the first person at the top of your insurance company's list and take that person and just schedule with them and immediately decide that that's the person you're going to meet with. I know it can feel overwhelming and time consuming to interview a couple different therapists, but I really think it's worth your while because if you think about this relationship is probably the next most important relationship to the one that you have with a significant other, because oftentimes you tell your therapist things that no one else knows. Sometimes even nobody else in your life at all except for the therapist knows some of the things you tell them, because it's a totally safe place to open up and know that you're not going to be judged. And if you feel judged at any point in time, you should point that out to your therapist, and if they don't acknowledge that and have a good conversation that you feel comfortable with after the fact, then you should definitely switch to a different therapist. I would always want to hear from a client if they ever felt like I was judging them, and I hope that they would feel comfortable telling me that, and I would definitely listen to that feedback and adjust accordingly. So if you feel judged, you're not with the right therapist. So going back to where do you look? So you need to shop around. Don't just go with the first person you find. And places to shop around. The best place to start is psychologytoday.com. There's a long list of therapists on psychologytoday.com. That's where my profile is posted, as well as pretty much anyone else who's in the therapy field knows that that's like the go-to place. So go to psychologytoday.com and then click on Find a Therapist. You can search by your zip code. You can search by your insurance. You can even search by the type of topic that you're looking for help with, like if it's PTSD or depression or anxiety. You can also I don't know if you can filter by language, but on mine, I can say that I speak Spanish, so it says te habla español at the top of it, if you're looking for a Spanish speaker. So you can kind of filter it out by a couple of different things. So if you have insurance and you want to pay with insurance, then definitely use that tool to filter it by your insurance company. If you are just paying out of pocket, then that doesn't matter for you. You probably just can use only the zip code and just see who's closest to you. And usually at the bottom of each profile page, we say how much we charge per hour. Rarely do you get less than $80 an hour. I do charge $70 to $80 an hour depending on the client. I will adjust for them, but most therapists are in the $80 to $120, $150 and up per hour phase. And most therapy sessions are normally 50 minutes, and a therapy hour is usually 50 minutes. So make sure you read what they say there about that, because a lot of times it's not a 60-minute session, although I have known some therapists that do a full 60-minute, but most of the time you're paying for 50 minutes, and that's pretty standard. Every now and then, sometimes people do 45 and 75-minute sessions as options, and if you're looking for help with a specific one-time trauma that you went through, one other thing that's good to look at is EMDR. That's a modality that I'll talk about in more detail in a different video. I don't want to go into that right now, but that is a really good treatment option for you. So you would want to look and see if that person says on their profile that they offer EMDR. That's not something that I'm currently certified in, so I would not be able to provide that, but I know a lot of other great therapists who do that, and that's a really good type of treatment for someone who's maybe you've been in a car accident, maybe a sexual assault, something like that, that is not complex PTSD, but was based off of one isolated situation. That could be a really good fit for EMDR. Sometimes EMDR is good for even if you have multiple traumas, it could still be good for you. It's just, it can take more time. So if you have questions about that, post a comment below, or message me, let me know, and I can give you more details about EMDR separately. So after you go on Psychology Today and you get a list of your therapists, you're going to want to call or email through the links right there. It says on the profiles, like click here to call or email the therapist now. So go ahead and do that. And I recommend doing it for like almost all of the ones that you feel like you have a good fit with. So you'll probably find, depending on where you live, I mean, it could be 5 to 10 people that are close to where you live, or if you're willing to travel farther, you might find up to like 30 therapists, especially in Boulder. There's tons of therapists in Boulder. So I encourage you to really read through the profiles and see if the vibe of their language sounds like something that you would click with. A lot of times we put our hearts out there and our personalities out there in our profiles, and that's a really good way for you to find out if you think, oh, this person sounds like, the way they talk sounds like someone I would get along with, or maybe not. So I would start there with that, and then I would go ahead and click on the link to email or call now and go ahead and contact all the ones that you think you might have a fit with. I'm serious, like at least 10 or more. Reason being, a lot of times people leave those profiles up year round, even if they are currently holding a full caseload, they don't necessarily take down their profile. So you'll reach out to some people and they won't respond to you because they're already full, or they will respond, but they'll just say, yeah, I can't take anybody right now. Other people, maybe they're totally open, but they only have a certain slot on a certain day, and that's just not a time that works for you, or they're very busy and they might not have an opening for 2 weeks and you're feeling like you need some urgent help right away. So in all of those cases, it's always good to spread a wide net, just because therapists can be pretty busy in their schedules, and kind of finding the slot time that works for your schedule and theirs can be tricky. So I highly encourage like reaching out to more rather than fewer therapists. Then go ahead and ask them right away. Almost everyone on Psychology Today should offer you some type of free consultation. Sometimes that's just over the phone, like 15 to 20 minutes of a phone call. Others will actually do like a 20 to 30 minute therapy session in person for free. So I highly encourage you to take advantage of that. Go do that with like 5 to 10 people. At least, sometimes that's not possible, but at least 3. Don't just go to the first one. Seriously, don't do it. Wait if you have to wait a couple weeks, but really shop around. It's just such an important, powerful relationship, and I think sometimes why people have a bad experience with a therapist is because they go to the first person at the top of their insurance list or whoever picks up the phone first, and that's not necessarily the person that's the best fit for you, and it's also not necessarily the person who's the most talented or skilled. Sometimes those people are harder to get into or take longer to hear back from, but it's sometimes worth the wait, because if you go, my fear is that I've known people who will just grab the first therapist they find. It's a terrible experience for them. It's not a good fit personality-wise, or maybe their modality or methods of treatment aren't the right fit for that person, and then they never want to go back and see a therapist because they're like, oh, therapy doesn't work. And I'm like, well, it's probably not that therapy doesn't work, because we have a lot of science that says that it does, but you probably weren't fitting with the right person. And it's just interesting to me, you put so much time and effort into other choices, right? We usually research things before we go on a vacation. I have friends who like research things a lot before they pick a restaurant that they go to. And, you spend a lot of time looking up backgrounds on people that you hire for other things. And then for some reason with therapists, it's like people just grab the first person that comes up on the list. And, I'll be honest with you, not everybody who's a therapist is necessarily really good at it, just like any other profession. So I really, really strongly recommend that you don't just go with the top of the list. Please don't. Don't do it. Don't do it. So after you look through the list and you find your people, send them all emails, and then when you hear back from them, you get the calls back, go ahead and set up all those consultations. Go to all the consultations, even if you think you're pretty sure that you've already decided, go ahead and just do them all because they're free and it's worth it. And then after that, you should email or call everyone back. Please do people the pleasure of letting them know if you're not going to work with them. Don't leave them hanging. It's polite and respectful to go ahead and shoot an email over and say, hey, we decided to go with another therapist, but thank you so much for your time. Or I've decided to meet with somebody else at this time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to give me a free consultation. That's just like common courtesy. And it's also helpful when therapists are trying to know what slots they're going to have available, because in the meantime, they might have had someone else inquire about a time slot. And if you don't respond to them, it's just kind of not thoughtful because they're kind of maybe waiting to hold it for you when they could just go ahead and release that slot for somebody else. So just be courteous, let them know if you're not interested, and then let the person that you are interested know. Another way you can find out about therapists besides Psychology Today is word of mouth. I highly recommend that you use word of mouth whenever possible, especially thinking about word of mouth coming from someone that you feel like you think similarly to or you get along with, right? If you have a good friend that you just you like the person, but you guys see the world very differently, their therapist may or may not be the right fit for you. So just because your friend had a wonderful experience with one therapist doesn't necessarily mean that therapist is going to be great for you. I've had that experience where a friend of mine and I both saw a therapist and then ended up both seeing another therapist that was, we both saw the same person once and then did it again. And like, I liked one of them better and she liked the other one better. So that's totally normal. So that's why I say like, go off of word of mouth or go to psychologytoday.com, but really, really don't just take one person. Take a couple word of mouth referrals and then also go on Psychology Today and interview a few of them either over the phone or in person, and then make a decision based off of that. It's definitely helpful when word of mouth is something that you have available to you. You're always welcome to talk to me, and I'm happy to give you my opinions and advice. Otherwise, I know sometimes word of mouth is hard because not everyone talks about the fact that they go to therapy. So your friends might have seen somebody, but they might not have told you that. So you don't have the same type of opportunities for word of mouth as you probably do for like a massage therapist or a doctor or something that's more socially acceptable. Although I think we're getting to a point in this day and age where most people are understanding that therapy is a really healthy thing for people to do and definitely not something to be ashamed of. In fact, in my opinion, it is something to be proud of, just because every time I meet anybody, if they tell me that they've seen a therapist or spent any time in therapy in their life, immediately, I have so much more respect for them, just because it shows me that that person has some self-awareness to acknowledge that they have some issues that they wanted to work on, because the reality is that everyone can benefit from therapy at least one time in their life. Not everyone's a good fit for therapy, long-term or anything like that, but everyone could benefit from at least doing a few sessions at some point in their life, because it helps you be a better person, and I just think the world deserves the best version of you. So props to you if you've ever gone to therapy or you're thinking about it, because that kind of sets you apart, in my opinion, from people who aren't really willing to face themselves and explore how they could be a better person. Another option that you have for therapy is to use an EAP plan. Always check with your employer to see if they have an employee assistance program. A lot of employers will now offer that these days. They're recognizing that helping somebody kind of firsthand right away, right after a crisis, can be really beneficial in the long run. So if you have an EAP plan, you can get 5 or 6 free therapy sessions. I am an EAP provider, so a lot of the clients that I see me because I am on a list of providers' names they're given from their employer, and then they can go to see me for 5 or 6 sessions for free. They don't have to pay a copay or anything. All of that is paid for by their employer. So if you're employed, go ahead and check with your employer and see if by chance they have an EAP program. And then you can get a list of providers by calling the EAP line, and then they will tell you, here's a list of people, or their email that to you. And then from that list, you can pick out a few choices. And again, like I said, still interview a few different people before you pick someone, but that's another way you can get some free therapy. If you're not sure if your insurance covers it, call them and ask. If you have a high deductible plan, you're probably gonna have to pay the full out-of-pocket price, obviously, until you hit your deductible. But if you don't have a high deductible plan, you may have some therapy sessions that are covered by your insurance. So you would just need to talk to them and find that out. So I would say Psychology Today and word of mouth, and then your EAP are your best bets. And if you have regular insurance like Cigna or Blue Cross or Anthem, things like that, you can also go onto their website and look at the list of providers that are on their website and start making phone calls down the list to find the people closest to you. I just feel like that's not as effective as Psychology Today, because on Psychology Today, you're actually able to get people's personality and read their profiles and get links to their websites, whereas like on an insurance website, you're probably just going to see a list of names. So I'm a big fan of Psychology Today. I definitely find that it's been really helpful both for me as a client and for me now as a therapist. I feel like it's very useful. So questions to ask your therapist. When you go in for your free consultation, definitely ask them about their education. Ask them about what they specialized in, what they studied. Like, everyone's a little bit different. For example, for me, I studied clinical psychology, so I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and then I went on and got my license as a licensed professional counselor. So in Colorado, you're going to find people that are registered psychotherapists. Those people don't have any license whatsoever. They're registered with DORA, the board for Colorado, and they are legally allowed to practice in Colorado. Not every state allows that, but Colorado's more lenient, so they do. And that's what I used to do before I got my license, because after I finished my master's degree program, it took a few years because unfortunately my program wasn't accredited because it was really science-based. So I had a couple extra counseling classes I had to take, so it took longer for me to get licensed than probably some people would. So in the meantime, I was a registered psychotherapist, and I still saw clients as a registered psychotherapist. I still feel like I offered a great service to my clients. So just because someone's a registered psychotherapist doesn't mean that they aren't very good at what they do. There's some people in Colorado that never get a license and just stay as a registered psychotherapist. So, that's fine. It's just important to know what that means. Someone who's has what I have, a licensed professional counselor, that person has actually taken the time to get all of the supervised hours that are required and taken the licensure exam in order to become a licensed professional counselor. So after your master's degree, you have to do, I don't even remember how many hours I did, because I did so many more than were required because I had this class I had to take that wasn't offered by my master's program. So I can't remember, but it's a lot of hours that you offer services with a supervisor watching over you and giving you feedback until you're licensed, and then you have to take an exam and you have to pass that, and then you get your license as a professional counselor. You might also see on Psychology Today a lot of people who are LCSWs. Those people are licensed clinical social workers. So they take a specific track of education so that they're able to provide clinical services, because social workers are more trained in systems than they are in individual people. But they have a really good education, and they're great to work with as well. I've had a really good experience with an LCSW who was one of my favorite therapists that I worked with. And you have to get additional exams taken and additional classes to be an LCSW versus just a regular MSW, which is a Master's of Social Work. So somebody that you're seeing on Psychology Today who's offering therapy will be a clinical social worker. So when you see LCSW, that just means a licensed clinical social worker. Another one you might see is an LMFT, which means a licensed marriage and family therapist. If you are going for family issues or for couple issues, those people are great because they have more specific training in that. I have seen some couples, and I really enjoy that work actually, and I'm working on the side to get more training in that to continue to be better and better at offering that service myself. But LMFTs are awesome if you can find one near you, because they are specialized in that. So if your issue is more something that involves a family or a couple, that might be a better fit for you. All of this information will be on all of our Psychology Today profiles, so you can look at the letters after our names and kind of see what our education is. So ask your therapist about that, what their educational background is. Ask them if they had a specialty. Like, for example, in my case, I have a specialty in trauma studies. So I've done extensive work with specifically women and children especially sexual assault and rape. I worked at a nonprofit, Tessa, in Colorado Springs, working with women and children from domestic violence, sexual assault, and rape. So those were kind of my areas of expertise. I mean, my master's specialization was trauma just in general, but I would say that I'm much more competent and confident in working with sexual assault, rape, domestic violence than I would say I am in working with let's say veterans or something. That's another good example of a population with PTSD. Now, I have worked with a lot of people with PTSD in multiple different contexts, but my specialty would be more the women's issues. So ask your therapist, what do you specialize in, or what did you study the most, or what interests you the most? Ask them about what courses they took, and any of those questions so that you feel comfortable. If that's not as important to you, then that's fine. You don't have to go into details, but it's just helpful to say, what is your licensure? Tell me more about what that means and what you had to do to obtain that. If you still have questions, you can also message me with any questions about that. Another thing that's important to ask how long they've been practicing, and what's their ideal client look like. That's really important to figure out if you guys are a good fit. If you ask a therapist, what is your ideal client? And they say something and you're like, that's not me at all. That might be a red flag that you guys might not be the best fit. So that's why it's helpful to ask them, what would your ideal client be like? What would they look like? What would they say? What would they do? For me, my ideal client would be someone wanting to heal from an abusive relationship, especially women, but I also really enjoy my male clients as well, who's really ready to be honest with herself and ready to move forward by taking some real reality checks into the patterns that they've engaged in their lives and ready to be open to feedback and really taking those action steps forward to try to change and to make that different. So that would be something that I might say for my ideal client. And that doesn't mean that I don't work well with a lot of other different types of populations, because right now I'm a generalist working at a community mental health center. I see everything. But it's still helpful to hear that if you're picking between therapists and you have options, then you might want to go with the one whose ideal client sounds more like you. So those would be the main questions that I would probably ask. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else. I know there's probably many, many more, but that's just what comes to mind right now, and this video is getting long, so I'm going to wrap it up. So those are the questions to ask, where to find the therapist, and then how to know when you're ready to terminate. One thing that's really cool is when a client starts to build a relationship with you and they're comfortable enough with you to ask, I feel like I'm getting better. I'm not sure if I need this anymore. That's a really important conversation to have with your therapist. Also, even in the beginning, to ask about, how often they meet with you, what are their expectations for how frequent your visits are. No therapist is going to be able to give you a crystal ball and tell you, oh, you're going to need 6 sessions and then you'll be better, or you'll need 12 sessions. That's not how it works. No one client is the same as any other, so we can't tell you that up front, but we can talk to you along the way about the process and help you understand, if we're feeling like you're getting better. An honest therapist with integrity is going to let you know, hey, I see that you're making progress. I feel like you're doing a lot better. Is this really helpful to you on a weekly basis, or do you feel like you're ready to drop down to once every other week? Usually in private practice, most therapists want to see you weekly or bi-weekly, but not always. Some people just see you as needed or on a month-to-month basis. I would say month-to-month, one time a month is just good once you're feeling really well and you're just wanting a check-in or some additional support. If you're in crisis, you should definitely plan on trying to do weekly. Just because it's hard to make traction if we're meeting once every 2 weeks. So it's very helpful to just start kind of get off the ground running with weekly sessions, and then eventually you can drop down to bi-weekly. Every therapist will probably give you a slightly different opinion on that. That's just my personal opinion. Bi-weekly works well for a lot of other people if they're not in a crisis. So it really just depends on you, but I would ask your therapist what their expectations are of how often you meet, and be honest with yourself, because if you start therapy and you think you're going to meet every other week and you start canceling, or you decide you want to meet once a month, just know you're probably not going to get results. It's just like if you go to the gym and you're doing that only once or twice a week versus going 3 to 5 days a week, you're going to see results a lot more slowly, and sometimes it's not even worth your time because you really don't see results. So be realistic with that. When you have expectations, let your therapist know what changes you're really hoping to see and recognize that you need to come consistently in order to see that happen. Last thing is just have realistic expectations. So therapy is not a pill. It is not a drug. It is not something that is a band-aid that's going to make the pain instantly go away. In fact, a lot of times it's more painful and more ugly and more nasty before it gets better. So it's really normal if you leave therapy feeling discouraged or feeling a little drained. Sometimes, not all the time, hopefully not every session. Usually you'll feel relieved, but may also feel a little bit emotionally tired. And you may, if you're going through trauma stuff from your past, you're going to feel sad. You're going to have reactions to what you're talking about in therapy. And that may be really hard to address and go through that before it gets better. And that's a part of the process. So I really encourage you to stick with it and don't quit. Don't give up if it gets hard in the beginning, because that's really a normal part of the process. And it doesn't mean it's not working. In fact, that usually is a sign that it is working. It's just that we're opening up some really powerful things in your life and creating a safe space for you to talk about things that oftentimes you've never spoken about in years, or maybe not told to other people. And that's really, really scary. It requires a lot of vulnerability to be in therapy, and we pace it appropriately. Therapists will be respectful of you and when you're ready to disclose things. But if you do start to disclose, it can feel like you're exposing yourself, and that can be a little scary. So if it brings up emotional reactions, talk to your therapist and let them give you coping skills, and you guys can work together to figure out what coping skills can help you get by from week to week and manage the stress that it may cause you well. Or you may not have much of a reaction at all, and you may just be like, yes, I finally am doing this thing that I wish I had done years ago. It just depends on the person. But just be open with your communication and know that if it's challenging at first, that's totally okay. It's just like starting a new diet. It's really rough in the beginning, and then you're really glad you did it later on as you develop new habits, and that's kind of how therapy is too. If you have more questions, please comment below, like the video. If you want to see more of this, I would really appreciate it. I'm open to talking about whatever topics you guys are interested in. All right, thanks for watching.